Hey everyone, and welcome to the first video of the new year. I thought to start things off it would be fun to show you the first trains I saw in 2024. New Year's Day began in Northwest Washington with a lot of dense fog. After a little deliberation, I decided to catch the morning southbound Amtrak Cascades train on its journey to Portland, Oregon in a nice, moody, fog-shrouded scene. I settled on the Cove Road railroad crossing in South Whatcom County as my location. A few minutes after I had finished setting up, Train 517 emerged from the fog with one of the two Talgo Series 8 train sets in Cascade service. Amtrak Cascades made a big schedule change on December 11th of last year. As part of this change, the two Oregon-owned Talgo sets are now regularly running on the stretch of the route between Seattle, Washington and Vancouver, BC for the first time since March of 2020. A little while later, with the fog starting to clear, Amtrak Cascades train number 516 approached Cove Road with an SC-44 Charger locomotive and the other Talgo Series 8 set. Later in the day, I decided to head up to the Vancouver area to catch Via Rail train number 2, the Canadian, as it departed eastbound for Toronto, Ontario. I chose a spot on the railroad known as Still Creek, which is just a couple miles to the east of downtown Vancouver. This section of railroad is owned by BNSF Railway, but currently on long-term lease to the Canadian National Railway. CN is also responsible for all maintenance and dispatching. In addition to Via Rail and CN, Amtrak Cascades passenger trains also pass through here twice daily in each direction. Vancouver's SkyTrain Millennium Line travels along the CN right-of-way in this area, connecting downtown Vancouver with Coquitlam. Amid a mix of mostly gray skies with the occasional break in the clouds, the Canadian roared up the grade after departing Vancouver's Pacific Central Station just 8 minutes behind schedule. Leading the train was a 3-pack of Via Rail's trusty, rebuilt F40PH locomotives. The Canadian is Via Rail's premier long-distance passenger train. It runs twice a week in each direction, departing Vancouver on Mondays and Fridays at 3 p.m. and arriving early on Sunday and Thursday mornings, scheduled in at 8 a.m. It is known by many as one of the world's last streamlined passenger trains, with refurbished passenger cars dating back to the 1950s. I decided to jump ahead of the Canadian to get a second shot of the train as it passed along the Fraser River on its way out of town. After a little waiting and a slow run through Canadian National's Thornton Yard, the Canadian flew by and into the darkness. The train passed a group of still-in-service searchlight-style signals. These signals use colored glass lenses that pass in front of an amber bulb to give the various signal indications. With the advent of positive train control, nearly all of these signals have now been replaced in the US with newer tri-lights that do not have all the moving parts found in the searchlights. I started the next day in the historic Fairhaven district of Bellingham, Washington, down at the Amtrak station. The station building was originally constructed around the turn of the last century as an office space for Pacific American fisheries. In 1995, it was converted into the new Amtrak station when Amtrak service between Seattle and Vancouver resumed after a 14-year-long suspension. Part of the reason for using this location, as opposed to the former Great Northern Depot in downtown Bellingham, was the close proximity of the site to the Alaska Ferry Terminal. In addition to passenger trains, Amtrak Cascades, throughway buses, and the local Whatcom Transit Authority bus system both serve Fairhaven Station. A little after 9 a.m., Amtrak Train 517 could be seen across Bellingham Bay with the Pacific Ranges of British Columbia's coastal mountains rising in the distance. Train 517 featured a 5-car set of Amtrak's Horizon passenger cars. With last month's schedule changes, this equipment is now on a 2-day rotation. On one day, it is used on trains 503 and 518 from Seattle to Portland to Vancouver. Then, on the next day, it completes the cycle on trains 517 and 506 from Vancouver to Portland and then back to Seattle. The cycle then repeats itself with the 5-car Horizon set and one of the 2 Series 8 Talgo sets switching off, each running on train 517 every other day. Amtrak Non-Powered Control Unit 90252, rebuilt from F40PH number 252, led the train along the shore as it approached Fairhaven Station. Charger Locomotive 1403 was completed by Siemens Mobility of Sacramento, California in March of 2017 and is owned by Washington State's Department of Transportation. It was the second Charger locomotive to enter Revenue Amtrak Cascades service, making its debut on December 3rd of 2017. After just a couple of minutes in the station, the train was once again on its way to Portland, Oregon. For about the last decade and a half, the city of Bellingham has pursued the creation of a railroad quiet zone through town. The quiet zone will see the elimination of the requirement for trains to sound their horns between the Harris Street crossing in Fairhaven and the F Street crossing in downtown Bellingham. Establishment will be in 2 phases, with the section from Fairhaven to Boulevard Park being completed first, followed shortly thereafter by the second section through the rest of the city. Progress has been slow for a while, but has picked up in recent years. New gates and signs have been added at the 6th Street crossing northeast of the station, and within the last week, construction workers completed the installation of a new fence along the south side of the railroad right-of-way. I next moved to the Country Lane crossing on the north side of town to await northbound Amtrak train 516. This crossing is a favorite of mine as it is the last crossing on the BNSF Bellingham subdivision in Whatcom County with a mechanical warning bell as opposed to the newer electronic ones. A light rain began to fall as a 15-minute late train number 516 passed by. I noticed a railroad signal maintainer down at the next crossing after the Amtrak had cleared. Figuring nothing would be headed through for a while, I went a few miles back to the south to see what was going on at the BNSF Bellingham yard. The 2 locomotives used for the BNSF Bellingham local, Job 803, were parked in their normal spot in front of the former Great Northern Depot. Great Northern opened this building in 1927 after the previous Bellingham Depot burned down. Amtrak last used the station in September of 1981 when the Pacific International from Seattle to Vancouver was canceled. Locomotives 2726 and 2842 are both type GP39-2 units. 2726 was a former Burlington Northern unit, while the 2842 once belonged to the Santa Fe. The 2842 is one of the last BNSF General Purpose Series locomotives in the Northwest Division to feature a cab-mounted headlight rather than one on the nose. With no sign of activity and the rain beginning to pick up, I walked a short distance down to where Whatcom Creek empties into Bellingham Bay to take a quick look at a boat. The ferry, the Evergreen State, was the longest-serving vessel in Washington State's ferry system, in service from November of 1954 through June of 2014. Since retirement, it has been sold into private ownership and changed hands a few times. It is currently slated for an experimental battery power conversion project and has been moored in Bellingham since 2022, previously stored down by the Alaska Ferry Terminal in Fairhaven. Just as I was getting ready to leave, I noticed the crew for the Bellingham local get on the locomotives and prepare to begin the day's work. I quickly drove down Roeder Avenue to get the 2 locomotives moving to the Bellingham yard to put their train together. After rolling through the yard, the crew picked up a refrigerator car from Bellingham Cold Storage and brought it back into the yard. The car was then coupled to a hopper car and a few center beam flats. Next, the crew brought the locomotives back east past the depot to switch tracks so they could run around to the other end of the yard. Knowing it could be a while for the train to be put together, I decided to part ways with the local. Later that afternoon, I happened to see a northbound loaded coal train passing along the waterfront with an interesting mix of General Electric units on the front. And that's pretty much how my first 2 days of 2024 went. Thanks for joining me for this first quick look at what I've seen so far this year. I wanted to try something different, so let me know what you think and maybe I'll do this or something similar again next year. As always, a big thanks to all my supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to receive regular notifications every time I post to YouTube, click on the subscribe button and select the Receive All Notifications option from the pull-down menu. You can find even more train and railroad-related content on my other social media pages. I'll be back next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time with another railroad-themed adventure right here on the YouTube channel. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Mike Armstrong. I'll see you down the line. Thanks for watching.